Hello friends, my name's Emile and welcome back to some more Forza Top Gear laps. Today we're going to be taking a look at the slowest cars available here in Forza Motorsport 6. And we start with the Volkswagen Samba Bus, 50 horsepower, 2,513 pounds of weight, actually quite light for a minibus, I guess. So these slow cars, we did this episode back in Forza Motorsport 5, and many of the things from that episode still stands. These vehicles are relatively unremarkable to drive. They have very little in the way of horsepower. They're fantastically slow. They do have some defining characteristics which I will mention, but overall they're not the most exciting vehicles in the world. For the most part, there are a couple of exceptions, of course. And the Samba Bus really is unremarkable. It's a fantastically slow, big bus. To be fair, it doesn't feel very heavy at all, and that's because it sort of isn't. I mean, £2,500, that's a lot less than what you'd expect the standard sports coupe to weigh. You know, in the grand scheme of things, this is probably one of the more lighter vehicles to go around the Top Gear test track. Absolutely flies through Hammerhead. I don't know how I got away with that on such skinny tyres. The Samba Bus is relatively decent. You basically flat out the entire way around the track as you'd expect. Rear engine, rear wheel drive, so you know, it doesn't have the same issues that usual cars would have when they're rear engine, rear wheel drive. Usually you'd expect the front to lift up and loads of sliding and stuff, but nope, the Samba Bus doesn't have enough horsepower to do that. 50 is not a lot, especially here in Forza Motorsport 6. Yeah, there's not really much I can say about driving the VW bus. It's relatively unremarkable. It's basically like driving a Beetle, to be honest with you. Really not too much difference between this and a Beetle. It doesn't feel any different, you know, it doesn't feel any heavier or anything. The only strange thing with this car is the cockpit mode. You really don't see the front end at all because there isn't any front end to it, essentially. Next up we have the Fiesta Bar 595, 28 horsepower this time round, 1,257 pounds of weight. This is the lightest vehicle here today. It's also the least powerful, as you might expect. In fact, it's the least powerful car in Forza ever, I believe. I don't think there's ever been a car that has less than 28 horsepower, even thinking back to the old Forza games. Still, the Fiat 500, the original 500, and the Bar 595, probably my favourite people's cars. I really do like the little Fiat 500s. They're so cute. And they're good looking cars, and I appreciate the utilitarian nature of them. The 595 Abarth is actually a lot of fun. It sounds crazy, it only has 28 horsepower for crying out loud, but it is a lot of fun through the corners. It reminds me a little bit of the Golf GTI in that respect, because that was a not particularly fast but very much a fun car to sort of throw around in the corners and chuck it about and so on and so forth. And you can do a similar thing with the 595. You, again, like with the Samba Bus, you basically flat out throughout this entire thing. It also has to be said this car is fantastically tiny. I believe this is the smallest car ever to go around our track, and I'm pretty certain it'll be the smallest car ever unless Forza decides to release, like, I don't know, the Messerschmitt freewheeler or something like that. But the 595 Abarth is fun. Is it quick? No. It is fun. Top speed on this is about 70-80 miles an hour. To be fair, this has a 4-speed gearbox, which is a lot more speeds than most of the vehicles here come with today. So it wasn't too bad overall. I enjoyed driving the 595. It is a good bit of fun. I think this track just has one too many straights for this car, but around Catalonia School or something like that, this could be a serious amount of fun. The little 595 Abarth, and of course, how can you resist those looks? Moving on to something that doesn't look quite as good. This is the Willys Jeep, 60 horsepower, 2,137 pounds of weight. Now, if the 595 Abarth was fun, this was the most surprising vehicle of the day, because the little Willys Jeep actually handles quite a lot like a go-kart. This is a very, very grippy, fun car to just throw around. Now, I was expecting it to lean through the corners heavily, but it doesn't. It really doesn't lean. You have loads of grip. This honestly feels like it could take you know, another 100 odd horsepower and it'd still be completely fine with it. It probably wouldn't be, but it feels that sturdy. It really is a fantastic car to drive. The biggest issue with the Willys Jeep is probably the gearbox in this. From what I remember, it is a 3-speed, and the top speed on this vehicle is 70 miles an hour. It redlines at 70, so it won't go any faster. Again, seriously quick for the hammerhead. I don't know if these vehicles just look quick through there because they're not very quick, or whether they are like just genuinely quick around there because you don't really have to worry about braking and so much in these vehicles and getting back on the power because there isn't really that much power there to begin with. But the Willys Jeep is a seriously fun car to drive. I seriously recommend giving both the 595 of Bath and this Willys Jeep a go if you haven't already. I believe they're actually relatively cheap cars as well. They're both an absolute insane amount of fun. The Willys Jeep is especially fun if you decide to stick a big old American V8 supercharged engine in there. In that case, the Jeep actually becomes a surprisingly good race vehicle, or at least it did back in Horizon 2. Next up, we're moving on to the modern day equivalent of the Willys Jeep. This is the Terradyne Gurkha, 300 horsepower, 16,499 pounds of weight. This is the most powerful vehicle here today by quite a lot. However, it is the heaviest vehicle here today, and in fact it's the heaviest vehicle in Forza. I believe this thing weighs double what a Hummer H1 does. And it also has to be said, this is one of the worst handling cars in Forza history. It's sliding through there, and it was doing about 30 miles an hour. This is an atrocious car to drive. I often said back in Forza 5 the worst car to drive was the Hennessy Venom. And now, well, it's this. This is just a horrible vehicle to drive. It feels like you're driving on ice, essentially. And what happens is, through the corners, you get massive understeer, which then turns into massive oversteer. And this car doesn't really have a bridge gap. It doesn't have a sweet spot. This thing either is frantic understeer or lots of oversteer, and it's not the nice sort of oversteer which is easily controllable. This, you really have to fight to get control of this vehicle again. I would assume that's just because of the weight being transferred around because it weighs so much. But it's just a horrible, horrible handling vehicle. It's also fantastically slow, as you could probably predict. I believe this has a diesel engine under the hood. It does have 300 horsepower, but it really feels like it could do with like 500-600 maybe. I don't know how The Rock managed to use this thing in Fast and Furious 5, to be perfectly honest with you, but there you go. I have nothing positive to say about the Gurkha, to be honest with you. There is no positives to this vehicle. The only thing it's good at is ramming other vehicles out of the way, and you need to go backwards around the track because there's no way this thing would catch up to them normally. Horrible vehicle to drive. It really was atrocious. It makes the Hummer H1 look like a Koenigsegg 1.1. That's probably the best thing to say about the Gurkha. Moving on now to the Subaru BRAT, 69 horsepower, 2,061 pounds of weight. The Subaru BRAT is a car I actually kind of like. It's got a bit of a charm of its own. It's very interesting. It's got 2 seats in the back with pistol grips on the actual thing, so you can hold on for dear life. I don't think you can legally ride in those back seats, and you really wouldn't want to, because I can imagine it's fantastically uncomfortable. The Subaru BRAT is another somewhat surprising car to drive. I knew roughly what this thing would drive like. I've driven a few of these back in Forza Horizon 2, and even here in Forza 6 I think I've driven 1 or 2 of these. And they're relatively light feeling vehicles, very chuckable, as you'd expect from something with so little horsepower. I believe this has I can't remember if this was a 3-speed or a 4-speed gearbox. It was pretty decent as far as the gearboxes from today is concerned, because they're all pretty terrible. The BRAT, yeah, pretty decent vehicle, I have to say. I was looking forward to throwing this around on the Top Gear track actually, just because it's a little bit different, a little bit interesting looking car, shall we say. We haven't had too many pickup trucks around anyway. I believe the only other pickup truck we've had is the Ford Raptor, I believe, and that set a relatively uninspiring time, but I can assure you the BRAT will not be beating the Ford Raptor. I think that was a 135. And yeah, the BRAT had much more horsepower than this does. But still, the BRAT was pretty decent overall. A likeable vehicle to drive. Massive amounts of understeer around that last corner. No point of braking. And our final vehicle for today is the Jeep Wagoneer. 144 horsepower, 4,499 pounds of weight. This was another big surprise. Like the other Jeep. This is actually a... Like, I was expecting this car to be fantastically wallowy through the corners, but wait for it. No lean whatsoever. This is actually a good handling vehicle. 144 horsepower is quite a lot for today's second most powerful car here today. Not so powerful in the grand scheme of things, but once again, this is another one of those Jeeps that feels like it could deal with another 60 odd horsepower and it would be completely fine with it. It was a good vehicle to drive, however, it had the worst gearbox I've ever driven in Forza Motorsport 6. Now, I joke about the McLaren F1 having a bad gearbox and not really getting out of second gear during the course of a lap. This has a 3-speed transmission. First gear lasts until about 70 miles an hour, I think. So this vehicle is essentially in first gear the entire way around the course. Second gear is up until about 90. And I don't even think I used third gear at any point during my travels around the Top Gear track. Yeah, the Wagoneer definitely needs a better gearbox. But other than that, it's not too bad. You saw off the line it was a bit sluggish. That's just the gearbox again. It's terrible. It really is a terrible gearbox. But if it didn't have a terrible gearbox, if it had a gearbox, say, out like a BRAT or something, it actually wouldn't be too bad. Yeah, the Jeep Wagoneer did surprise me, which is surprising to say the least. A little bit of understeer through the last corner, but across the line. Anyways, on to the times, and the Wagoneer was the fastest vehicle of the day with a 144.612, beating out a Hummer H1 and also beating out the Subaru BRAT, which got a 148.130, which is nowhere near the Ford SVT Raptor. The Willys Jeep got a 152.993, which for a car from 1945 isn't bad. I mean, some of the celebrities around the actual real life Top Gear track have done it in slower times than that, and this is coming from a 70-year-old Jeep with virtually no power. A bar 595 goes for a 2 minutes 1 second and 73.7. Sorry, I completely botched that. I apologise for that. The Samba Bus 203.460 and the Gurkha 208.352. The Gurkha was terrible. The Gurkha really was god-awful. And I'm very happy I don't have to drive that vehicle. I think that might be the slowest vehicle we'll ever have around the Top Gear track. Anyways, friends, I hope you did enjoy this episode. I apologise if my commentary has been a little bit off. It's a bit hard to commentate sort of the slower laps. As for next week, I'm not too sure what we're going to be covering, but stay tuned. Anyways, I'll try and make sure the next episode actually goes up on time. Anyway, friends, I want to thank you all very much for watching. My name's been the Real Emile. Until next time, farewell.